My guest today is Kristen Gaylord, Assistant Curator of Photographs at the Amy Carter Museum of American Art.
I'm really excited. This is the first retrospective of this really important artist who's been around for decades but hasn't gotten the full retrospective treatment. So in this exhibition, you'll sort of see from earliest work to what she's doing today, 5 series that encapsulate her contribution to American photography.
Okay, so let's go check out these 5 different sections.
Sounds good.
All right. So we're in the first series of the show called Vietnam. Can you please tell us about it?
Sure. So, An Mi was a Vietnamese refugee to the United States because of the Vietnam War. And 20 years later, the U.S. normalizes relations with Vietnam, and she's able to go back for the first time since she was evacuated as a teenager. She's exploring ideas of memory and homeland and the effect that the war had on the Vietnamese people. And she creates beautiful landscape images like this. There's people in it, of course, but you can see that the building and the surrounding, the setting is actually given as much attention as the figures in it.
Tell us about Small Wars.
Yes, this is the second series in the show. So An Mi comes across a group of Vietnam War reenactors in her research and is fascinated at the idea that people would want to reenact this foreign controversial war here in the United States. She reaches out to them and asks to photograph, and they say yes, but only if you participate. This image is an example of one of the roles that she took on in these reenactments. Here she is as a Viet Cong rebel ambushing and sniper shooting U.S. forces.
Must have been a pretty intense experience for them as actors and models. Huh?
Yeah, reenactors are often very interested in authenticity, right? They source original gear, they make sure their equipment and down to the buttons are accurate, but most of them hadn't served in the war. And here, An Mi adds another element of authenticity, right? She's a Vietnamese American woman who was there for the war, so she kind of heightens the realism of these reenactments.
Okay. So we have a pretty intense desert warfare scene. Tell us about 29 Palms.
Yes, the third series in the show. So again, An Mi's series really build on each other, and after looking at reenactments of a past war, her next series is looking at training and preparation for a war that's happening and to come. So she goes out to the Marine base in California called 29 Palms and photographs men and women who are about to be deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan. This is the California desert, not a Middle Eastern desert, but it still is so...
it feels very foreign.
Yeah, it's foreign, but it also it makes our military look small, which it's not, right? The great American fighting force is dwarfed by the size of the mountains in the sky here. They look like toy tanks instead of real tanks.
You mentioned she actually tried to get out into the actual scene of warfare.
Yeah, she had wanted to embed when we first invaded. She was really interested in going over there, but of course all of the news journalists and photojournalists had seen this coming and had gotten over there a lot ahead of her. So she sort of, how can I deal with this topic if I can't be there? She can deal with it by imaging people who are preparing for it, who are going to be there soon.
Let's talk about the series Events Ashore.
This is the 4th series in the show, and again, builds on the previous one. So An Mi decides to explore the U.S. military throughout the world, as opposed to just training or in a current war. So this series, Events Ashore, she spends 9 years off and on submarines and aircraft carriers, traveling with the Marines and the Navy, exploring, again, the edges of war. Not combat, not the kinds of things you see in movies and newspaper articles, but everything else that encompasses military life. I love this image. It's formally beautiful, the balance of the reds and the 4 figures here, but also so futile. They're washing down this huge structure with these little hand sponges, right? And again, this is sort of a beautiful metaphor in some ways for doing the work that you can where you are, even if the task is so much bigger than you are. So there are a lot of different images in this series, and they cover a lot of different activities. This one is sort of more like a chore, right? There's also images of humanitarian missions, Marines in Haiti after the earthquake, for instance, or training other nations' forces in rescue, or even tutoring people for an English language exam. So she really is showing the full scope of how the U.S. military influences countries around the world, and really is the main interaction with this country that a lot of people have.
So we're in the 5th and final part of this 5-part series, so tell us about Silent General.
Yes, Silent General is a project An Mi started in 2015 that she's still working on, so this is just some of the images in it. It actually started with this scenario where she was asked by a movie director to take images of a Civil War movie he was filming. And it's perfect for On Me, right? Reenactments, the artificiality and authenticity, stuff she'd been exploring for decades is all wrapped up in this.
Oh.
You can see her attention to, you know, the reality, the sort of realism of these soldiers here, and then all of the gear that helps us, like explosives set up over here, believe that we're seeing authentic Civil War battle as opposed to a stage setting of it. The series continues outward from here, though. She starts to explore other aspects of the legacy of the Civil War. So Confederate war memorials and their removal and controversy in this country is one of those topics, as is our relationship to agricultural labor and the people who do that work. So it becomes a really open-ended meditation on the legacy of the Civil War and also the current division in this country that she's still working on, taking images of COVID, for instance, up until the present moment.
So the Amy Carter Museum has put together some fun interactive elements for this show. What are we looking at?
Yeah, so we have two elements to that show I worked on with our wonderful education department. One of them is this Community Voices Guide, where for each of the 5 series, we featured a different DFW community member who has experiences related to the issues that On Me deals with. So for instance, here, a female veteran who served aboard an aircraft carrier who talks about what it means to be a woman in that scenario, or a Vietnam veteran who himself works at the National Museum in Weatherford now, who's around these artifacts of the war every day and talks about what that means to him personally. So it's really a way to bring these historic and national issues to a local level with community voices from the people in this community. The other thing that we're looking at here is an infographic of Confederate memorials in Texas. This is information that we gathered over the period of a few months that just lets people have a conversation in front of this about what they're noticing and what they think about it. There's a map that shows you where the memorials are and their status, whether they're remaining, as most of them are, or they've been removed or relocated. There's a timeline that tells you when they were erected, and you can see there's sort of patterns you can talk about here, and also if they have been removed, when that happened, which is a very contemporary movement. And finally, this also tells you who sponsored them and the kinds of people that have a stake in these monuments. So it's a really helpful way, again, to think about how these national historic issues affect us in our state of Texas.
Well, it's an amazing show. We've enjoyed learning the stories behind these photographs. There's a lot to dig in here. We encourage folks to come out this Sunday and to check it out in person. Yeah, we have an artist talk on Saturday too, which you should all tune into, and the show is up through August 8th, so you have time to come by and see it in person. But don't wait too long. Don't wait too long. Okay, thank you again. Of course.